right. Well, thanks for joining us at the Agile at Scale meetup for April of 2024. I've got a great presentation on hand today. But before we get to that, we will talk briefly about who Agile Austin is, especially for those of you who have not joined us before. Our mission, it's really about connection, collaboration, professional growth, and just learning more about Agile values. And so Agile Austin is a 501c6 nonprofit. We do have a board. Elections are coming up really soon. So certainly encourage you, once you see any announcements on our LinkedIn page or any of our other social media channels or newsletter, we will be sending out notifications about those elections, what those look like, and would love to have you join us on the board. We do have at least two members of the board retiring this coming year. Scott Killen, Chief Financial Officer. He has been with us since the beginning of Agile Austin, and we're very thankful for everything he's done for the organization. He'll no longer be with us, and our Chief Product Officer role will be opening up, and all of our roles essentially are open and available for people to run for. So we'd love to see you. Feel free to contact us even before you see those communications about the board at board@agileaustin.org. We want to thank our sponsors. They're what make these events free and possible. We have Agile Velocity and Ad Meliora Coaching. We will post some links in the chat in a little bit to get to those sites for them. Definitely check them out. Of course, Agile Velocity has a code you can hear, so 15% off all of their public workshops, code Agile Austin. And so we would love to have you make use of their services because they have been a longtime supporter of our organization. If you are interested in becoming a sponsor, you can contact us at contact@agileaustin.org or visit our site for more information. We also are sustained by our memberships. We have not raised that fee pretty much ever. It's been $35 since the inception of the organization. So feel free to join us. We've got a lot of things that you can do with that membership, and also a Slack space. Agile Austin meetups. I need to update this slide. Our product and AI SIG, or AI and product SIG, I think it's been renamed, is our newest one. And so we just posted the second meetup. There was an organizational meetup that we had. So check out the meetup site for more details on that. We also have Agile coaching, Lean Kanban leaders, this one Agile at Scale, and the book club as well. So a lot of things going on throughout the month. If you check out our meetup.com agileaustin page, which you probably came to this meeting from, lots of good stuff available there. So just talking about us briefly, Leland started up the SIG 8 years ago, 2016. So quite a streak he's got going there. The only one that's been running longer continuously is the Leader SIG. So great job by Leland by just getting great speakers in month after month. And so I've been helping with logistics and sometimes running them. I joined in 2020. Upcoming, we have Leland and Natalia will be talking about empowering ways for better flow and business agility in May of 2024. I think I got that title right. If I didn't, Leland can correct me. So looking forward to that talk in May. And then in June, we've got Todd Miller, who will be talking about unlocking business agility with evidence-based management. And then we have July open. So if you're interested in being a speaker, got some contact information coming up here in a couple slides if you're interested. But for today's presentation, we have Prateek Singh, who's joining us from South Florida. Really love the ability for Agile Austin to expand our horizons. The pandemic, one of the silver linings is we've had some renowned speakers from across America and even the globe join us, and Prateek is one of those. So looking forward to hearing his talk today. And so I just have one more slide here to go over. So either leland.newsom@agileaustin.org or ben.rogers@agileaustin.org will reach us. And yeah, we're happy to answer any questions. Or if you're interested in being a speaker or helping us out, definitely let us know. So with that, I am going to stop sharing and hand things over to Prateek. So Prateek, take us away.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you, Leland, and everyone in the group, really, for inviting me here. This is one of those. Well, let me actually start sharing before I get into more of this. There we go. Nice. And then pull you all over so I can look at you while I'm talking. This is one of those weird, those movies where you have four different storylines and they connect, kind of like one of those kind of presentations. So if it gets too unwieldy, just holler at me, just let me know. I might throw questions out to you all in the middle. So you come off mute, use chat, whatever you want to answer those questions. And I think Ben told me he's going to keep an eye on the chat as well. So feel free to drop things in as we're going along. I don't mind taking a pause and talking about things you all want to talk about. So this is the fourth semester theory, Prateek Singh, head of learning and development pro Kanban.org, independent consultant, and also the co-host of the Drunk Agile podcast. So, if any of you want to hear things about whiskey and Agile, tune into the Drunk Agile podcast. You'll hear probably more about whiskey than about Agile on that, but whatever helps you. Before I get into Toyota and Ford and all that stuff, I'll talk a little bit about something Toyota and Ford have caused, which is traffic. Uh, this is actually it's very apt because this is a photograph from a highway in Texas, not near Austin, not in Austin, but kind of near Houston. I don't know if you all can recognize it just by looking at it, but anyone guess what this is? One of the widest highways in the world.
Is it I-10, Katy Freeway?
It is I-10. It is the Katy Freeway. Exactly, it is. It is Katy Freeway. It is. Leland gets a gold star. Yeah, it's the Katy Freeway. It's 26 lanes wide at some point. Like it's one of the widest in the world. It is not the widest in the world. It is one of the widest. I think it's the widest highway in North America for sure. 2004, it was recognized as the second worst bottleneck in the nation. And between 2008 and 2011, they expanded it quite a bit. It spent $2.8 billion in expanding this highway. The picture you're seeing is after the expansion. That photograph is after the expansion. Anything interesting about this photograph? Anything that stands out to you all in this photograph? Anything? I know it's a little zoomed out, a little blurry, but anything that stands out as you look at this?
What stands out to me is that some lanes are completely blocked, but some of the other lanes are not blocked.
Absolutely. Some of them, like the lanes going away from us, are completely blocked. The lanes flowing towards us have some sort of a flow going on. Absolutely. Yeah. We've created this 26 lane wide highway, of which in one direction it is absolutely completely blocked. How would you fix that?
Well, if you're asking me again,
Go for it.
Because it's been done before, it's been done in the past, is that they change and control flow of traffic. There's some lanes that actually switch. So you have the same 26 lanes, but it doesn't have to be 13 going this way and 13 going that way, depending on the traffic flow.
Depending on whether if it's morning rush hour, it goes one way. If it's
Exactly.
afternoon, it goes the other way. As you can see, we've attempted to fix this. We spent $2.8 billion trying to fix this. And the way we tried to fix it was adding lanes. We did construction to add more lanes so that it could be fixed. We'll come back to this. We'll come back to this. If I give you all the answers right now, you're just going to leave. So we'll come back to this. We'll come back to this in a bit. Before we come back to that stuff, we'll talk about this gentleman here, Henry Ford, posing in front of his world famous Model T at that time. Henry Ford also had certain views that we will not talk about that are not for polite audiences. We're going to talk about more of his efforts that revolutionized the industry itself, that revolutionized the way people worked. There's a reason why Henry Ford was a titan of the industry. There was a reason why he produced so much valuable product for his consumers. The timeline of Henry Ford's career in the Ford Motor Company, as he found the Ford Motor Company in 1903. The Model T started coming out in 1908. That's when it started on it. He created the first assembly line, which is perfectly his biggest accomplishment, his biggest contribution was the assembly line, which was in 1913. But then he does something very interesting. He more than doubles the pay of his workers. Like he goes twice the rate for the average rate out there in the industry. He more than doubles the pay, and he institutes an 8-hour workday. It used to be most work weeks used to be for the auto workers used to be 9 to 10 hours, or 6 days of 9 to 10 hours. He changes it to 5 days of 8 hours, and despite that, despite reducing number of work hours, increasing pay, he's able to more than half the price of the Model T. The price of the Model T at that point goes from $825 down to $345 because of all the other inventions like assembly lines, like all the different processes he added. He's able to actually reduce the price while increasing pay. He's also able to increase sales from 20,000 to 600,000. Around the time 15 millionth Model T is produced, something else happens. In 1927, Ford actually goes out and does something very interesting, not talked about a lot. Can anyone guess what's the event in 1927 that I might be talking about? Do you have any idea? I know Leland was telling me he was reading a book that might have the answer to it, but
yeah, I was holding out on answering.
yeah, I know.
Creating the Model T?
Sorry, Sharon?
Either creating the Model T or the assembly line?
That he does that a lot earlier. He does that in 1908 and the early 1900s. Yeah, the mid 1920s. He's a very interesting. I'll give you a hint. It's a very interesting purchase he makes. If anyone knows about that. Yeah. All right, Leland, your chance to shine here.
I'm going to call it he offshored it.
He offshored it. It's an interesting little thing he does. He goes out to Brazil and buys a huge tract of land called Fordlandia. He buys this huge tract of land in Brazil. It's bigger than Yellowstone National Park. That's how big this area is, and it's in the heart of Brazil. It's in the Amazon basin. And being Jeff had already answered it. Jeff Fisher, yeah, the Brazil complex. Being the humble person that he is, he names it after himself. He calls it Fordlandia. So Ford goes out there and buys Fordlandia, and that has some interesting consequences. Aaron's already talking about some of those consequences in chat, I see. But it has some interesting consequences. What happens with Fordlandia? I'll talk about why he goes out and buys Fordlandia. here in a bit, but he makes this expensive purchase. Before we get to that, yeah, he had done all these big things where what Ford had developed in that time frame, before he buys Fordlandia, is this framework that worked really well for him. It worked. It did a great, excellent work for him. It helped him get to very high productivity while taking care of his workers. There were multiple things he had done, and we talked about a bunch of these already. You know, he created the assembly lines where machines were close to each other. There were higher wages. Work hours were reduced. He also added this thing called a sociological department, which the whole idea of that was to improve the workers' personal standard. He was a big believer in prohibition. So he included that as a part of the moral standing of his workers. He did all these things in order to improve what he believed was a part of his work, which was to improve the lives of his workers, to improve the personal standards of his workers. He goes out, buys Fordlandia at some point. He's developed this framework, this great framework that works really nicely for him. And he's like, well, we bought this place which can help us grow. And the reason he thinks it can help him grow is Ford has mastery over a lot of parts of car development, or developing the car. The one thing that he does not have mastery over is where his tires come from. The British controlled the supply of rubber, or the rubber trees were in British and Dutch owned areas. And they were grown in Brazil, they were grown in Sri Lanka, in Malaysia, all these places, in India as well. And Ford wanted to vertically integrate. He was like, if I have a place I can grow rubber, then I can build my own tires and I don't have to be dependent on anyone. So that's what he did. That's why he went out to Brazil and bought this huge tract of land so that he could grow his own rubber trees, create his own plantation, and get all the benefits that he's looking for. So he goes, buys this. It's as I said, it's larger than Yellowstone National Park. Further, he says it's not just about getting the rubber out. It's also taking that framework that has worked really well for me, taking that and bringing that to the Brazilians so it works really well over there as well. This framework that we have created, how do we take that and lift and shift that framework so that it works well for us and works well for them? Well, remember, he had done all of these things. This was the framework he had developed. This was the exact thing that he had done. He takes this framework that he had developed in Dearborn, Michigan, and transfers it over to Brazil, to Fordlandia. You know, just like an assembly line, trees are planted close to each other. Wages were increased, almost doubled once again. The 8-hour work week was introduced. You know, Ford actually brought his own managers over from Michigan to help us, and he created a sociological department, just like he had in the U.S. In the Midwest. He takes an active interest in the personal standards and lives of his workers. There are poetry readings. There's line dancing. He goes full force, taking the framework he developed and applying it. This was there were a lot of very, very interesting things that he tried to do. In fact, there's some pictures from Fordlandia. These are from Henry Ford's art collection, actually, not art collection, the Ford Foundation pictorial collections. These might as well be in Michigan. Like he's not just brought in the policies, he's also brought in the housing structures and all that from the 20s. He's literally taken up everything that he did in Dearborn and transferred it over to Fordlandia. As some of you could potentially see in the chat as well, this did not work really well. This did not work really well. When the rubber met the road, there were major issues with this. The assembly line setup meant that trees were close to each other, which means parasites could jump across trees. 8-hour work days might work when you're working indoors, but when you're working outdoors in the heat and humidity, that just doesn't work. In fact, at some point, they were just full-scale riots. The Brazilian army had to come in to actually to calm things down and quell the riots that were happening there. It ended up being quite a debacle once it started going. The local workers completely rebelled against this. In fact, by 1945, the Ford Motor Company actually had sold Fordlandia. And by the way, he tried to experiment again. A few miles upstream, he built another town called Belterra and tried to do the same thing. It didn't work there either. By 1945, they sold it back to the Brazilian government, made a loss of over 20 million. That's 20 million in 1945. And Henry Ford actually never even made it to one of these towns. He never stepped foot in either of these towns. Around the same time as this was happening, Toyota, folks from Toyota actually visited Ford's plant, and they wanted to find out how they could replicate the success that Ford had had. Toyota was much further behind in terms of production capability than Ford was, and Toyota wanted to figure out what can we learn from Ford. In fact, Taiichi Ohno at that point realized that they could not just copy Ford. There are many stories about this trip, and some of those say that Taiichi Ohno learned more by going to the supermarket in the U.S. than he did by going to Ford's plants. What he did discover was we needed a leaner system to get the stuff done. A company that had just come out from losing World War II could not copy what Ford was doing. This became the foundation of the Toyota production system. This is where Toyota production system came from. In fact, this is where, as you all have most likely heard, this is where the whole idea of a lean transformation came. And as the Toyota production system was developed, as lean was developed, they didn't create a framework for lean. Lean Six Sigma stuff came later, which tried to wrap framework around it, but lean transformation by itself, lean itself does not have framework. It's just a principle. There's principles that are context dependent. You take these principles and you apply them in your context, and that gives you the transformation. It's not a lift and shift framework. There are principles that you apply. Womack, Jones, and Ruth, in their book, which I recommend people read, especially Agile practitioners, The Machine That Changed the World, they actually enumerate these steps. These are the 6 steps to take in order to create a lean transformation. Those are a lot of words to read, so there's a simpler way to look at this. There are the lean transformations are essentially this circle. You identify value, you identify the things that customers will pay for, that provide value to customers. You map the value stream, you figure out how those things become valuable. You create flow, you make sure that anything that you start has a chance of actually making it to the customer. You establish pull, and we can talk a lot more about pull systems, where you do things like limiting WIP so that you pull work when you have space available to pull work. And then you seek perfection. And you kind of keep going in this circle over and over again and keep improving. If you ask Toyota when was their lean transformation done, they will say it's not done, we're still doing it. Because you keep going in the circle and keep applying these principles over and over again. It all starts from identifying what's valuable to your customers. I would argue that the essence of all Agile is lean. For Agile practitioners, that circle should look very familiar. Almost everything that we do, everything that we do, falls somewhere in that circle. That circle represents lean, which for me represents agility. The question that the question that I have left you with, which should be rattling in your brains, is if Ford had such a great framework, why did Fordlandia fail? I just want to switch back to that really quick. Why do you think Fordlandia failed if all those things that he had done, which Toyota also rejected, why did it fail? Why did Fordlandia fail to deliver the same way Michigan had delivered?
Well, I'll just chip in, Max from Austin.
Mhm.
There's a lot other variables than just the assembly line. You've got to look at cultural implications, ways that people are used to work, environmental stuff, everything else. And it can go on and on, but I've always been surprised how this even happens with some leaders and decision makers. Oh, these practices work very good at my last company. I'm going to come here and before even understanding how things exactly work and
Yep.
all the environmental, try to implement the same thing. They're just got so many nightmares from that scenario.
Absolutely, yeah, and so have we all, right? We all have the scars of
Yeah.
and let alone leaders. We have someone coming in externally saying, "Hey, I have this hammer. I don't care what you have. This hammer will work."
There you
Uh,
go.
exactly that and I see people in the chat saying the same thing. You know, like it was a cultural problem. It was the fact that a good process might have just been applied in the wrong environment. Yeah, it's absolutely all of those things. Ford had a recipe, and regardless of all the things that you all mentioned, the context, the culture, the people, he took that recipe and was going to implement that recipe. That's what he did. The framework was applied without any flexibility and understanding of the ground realities. Some of you were mentioning a book on this, which was written by, you all were just a little ahead of me. Greg Grandin is the one who wrote that book. And in his interview with NPR, he mentions a few things. And the first thing he says is the first failure of Fordlandia was social. It was the fact that, did not understand what the cultural context was. I just love the second quote on this because the last line of that, like not one drop of latex from Fordlandia ever made it into a Ford car. That is just amazing. All that money, all that time spent, and literally zero value. In a way, negative value. That's and it was all because the ground realities were not taken into account. And you probably all already see this. This is why I prefer something like a lean approach, which essentially says here are principles, apply it to your ground reality and keep building on them. Keep start from ground realities instead of the recipe that we have. Recipes are great for Thanksgiving dinner, but not for change. So if you have a large framework, if you have a large recipe, it carries a large risk. The risk being that you could potentially be applying it in absolutely the wrong context without care for cultural context. This is where if you ask the exact same question of why do agile transformations fail, well, it's because we've become more focused on recipes rather than the mindset. We've become more focused on how do I apply this recipe instead of how do I understand the context and apply some base principles. I always find it interesting. We tell our teams, hey, yeah, make a little bit of progress, find out if you're working on the right thing, adjust. That's what we tell our team. Be agile about stuff. Meanwhile, when it comes to implementing agile, we're like, here's a big framework, go implement it. It just sounds very disingenuous For me, the best approach to implementing Agile is Agile. You start small, and then you add things if you need to, or you adjust things as you need to. Agile is about discovering what works best, not knowing what works best. The I don't know which line it is, the first or the second, something about in the Agile Manifesto, which says we're uncovering better ways. We don't know better ways, we're uncovering better ways. It's just about discovering what works best, not knowing what works best. That's why this is not a recipe. This is a way to uncover what works best. I'd go even further. I would say the lean circle is asking you to break the rules in the pursuit of value, flow, and perfection, not follow the rules. If there's a framework in front of you, how do you break the rules of that framework so that you can be leaner, be more agile? If you have everything preset, if your Agile implementation has a roadmap, there's something off about it. There's something wrong about that. In fact, all this applies to any implementation. While there's value and stuff on the right, we value the things on the left a lot more. That there is the all the things on the left here, especially I'm going to talk about the last one there a little bit more. Eliminating waste over adding processes. That one goes way back actually. That one, another way to say that is we want to make progress via negativa. We want to make progress by removing the unnecessary, not by adding new things. We want to talk about how we remove the stuff that's in our way rather than add things that can then eventually get in our way. This actually, there's an apocryphal story about Michelangelo. Someone asked him, how did you carve David? How did you carve the sculpture of David? And Michelangelo said, the sculpture was already there. I just took away the parts that were not David. Your ideal process is already hiding inside of your company. You just have to take away the unnecessary stuff that we have added to it. That is making progress via negativa. An exact opposite example of making progress via negativa or making progress by adding is the Katy freeway. They kept adding lanes, and it did not solve the problem. In fact, I would say it made the problem worse. It's created a bigger traffic jam. Instead of relieving the traffic jam, anytime anyone sees a crowded highway, they go, oh, if we just had one more lane. And that's exactly what people did here. We just had one more lane till the point we got to 26 lanes. And we haven't really fixed the problem. In fact, don't believe me, go take a look at the studies out there. 2011 was when the construction was finished. Since 2011, between 2011 and 2014, when this data was collected, the morning commute went up by 30%, and the evening commute went up by 55%. It actually made things worse. The adding of lanes to a highway actually made things worse. And this is not an uncommon phenomenon. In fact, it has a name. This is a common phenomenon actually in urban planning called induced demand. When you make something better, when you add lanes to a highway, more people tend to use it, which makes things worse, not necessarily better. It's called induced demand. What induced demand tells us is that adding lanes to a highway does not fix traffic. It does not. I'll come back to this too, but it has major implications that some of you are already talking about for your org design and your org structure. Adding lanes to a highway does not fix traffic. I'm going to talk about somewhere I worked a long time ago. In 2005, I was working at this company. We started with Scrum in 2005. We had teams of 6 to 10 people, and they were all responsible for individual functional areas. The company did well. We started making more money. We also started getting more demands, started expanding our product suite, started adding lanes to the highway, started getting working on more and more stuff. And pretty soon we went from 10 teams to 30 teams. And there were all these dependencies between teams. There were all these things that all the things that had helped us become very successful started getting in our way. We were getting caught up in these dependencies. And back then, this is 2008, all these scaling approaches did not exist. None of these scaling approaches exist. So there was nothing out in the market that we could go and say, hey, maybe that will help, maybe that will help. Well, we were essentially sitting around thinking, what is going on here? We have added all this capacity to our system, and things look like they're actually slowing down. We added more people to our company, to our organization. We added more teams, and things are slowing down. What was happening? And this is where you go back to the induced demand strategy. Exactly what was happening was even though we had added people, it was not fixing our problems of flow. Anytime things were taking too long, we were adding another team. Let's hire more people, add another team. Still flow, add another team. That was not fixing the flow of value. We were set up in that traffic situation. All these dependencies, all these features holding other features up. This is where we started to look back at the whole idea of making progress via negativa. How do we remove things that are unnecessary to make progress? How do we do that? One of the things we did, and I saw a comment earlier in the chat that you're not going to like me anymore after this. One of the things we did, one of the unnecessary things we removed, was all these boundaries between people. Instead of having teams of 6 to 10 people and a total of 10 teams, we created teams of 10 to 30 people. In fact, some teams were as big as 35 people that were able to take care of everything themselves. They didn't have any dependencies with other teams. They were able to self-organize around work and get that work done. They started focusing on flow because we removed the boundaries between these teams. Further, this is back in 2008, 2009. We stopped sprinting. We removed sprints as a part of our thing. That we felt that was artificially constraining us. We stopped doing sprint planning. We still had daily scrums, but we started, or daily stand-ups, whatever you want to call them. But again, this is 2008. We stopped doing the 3 questions. Later on, I was happy to see the Scrum guide drop the 3 questions too. We replaced all these things with questions of flow. What is happening in our system right now, and what is causing things to not flow? We essentially reverted to these lean principles, talking about what is valuable for our customers. How does it reach the customer? How do we create flow, and how do we keep improving that flow? We did this over and over again with multiple teams, with multiple of these large teams. In fact, if you think about it, I'm just going to go do a quick demo of how we did this. The first step of that lean circle is to identify value. Like, we cannot identify value without knowing who our customer is. Our customer is who's going to tell us what's value. So let's see all the things that customer believes are value. Cool. These things are what customer believes are value. Second step, let's map the value stream. All right. What are all the steps we take in order to make something valuable for our customers? All right. These are all the steps we take to make things valuable for our customer. Well, create flow. All right. What are the rules? What are the rules that create that flow so that things can move across and reach the customer? All right. Let's write those rules down. In development, code has to be written. Unit tests have to be written. In testing, this has to be done. That has to be done. What are the rules that enable flow of value to the customers? Next step is to establish pull. Well, we added some things called whip limit to say the only way you establish pull is by controlling the number of things you have. and only pull new work in when you have capacity to pull work. Rather than people coming and pushing work onto you, how do you pull work in when you have capacity to pull work? For example, in this case, it looks like analysis has a capacity to do 3 things. It's WIP limit 3. There's one thing sitting out there. Well, we can pull that thing in. Great. We've identified value, mapped the value stream, created flow, established pull. The last bit is to seek perfection. That for us was understanding how long does it take for things to flow through our system, and can we keep improving that? So we started measuring that and said, oh, it looks like this team gets 80% of the time gets things done in 8 days or less. Can we do better? Can we improve that? By measuring our system, we can determine this. We did this at the team level. We did this at a higher level too, at the department level as well. Kind of follow the same pattern and figured out what does this look like. For those of you in the know, that is a Kanban board. But this Kanban board came directly from Lean principles. So there are 6 elements of a Kanban board. All 6 are represented there. And that's exactly what we did. This is a Kanban board for one of those 25 people teams that I was talking about earlier. You'll notice there are a lot fewer than 25 cards. Those blue cards are the things that we worked on. There are a lot fewer than 25 cards on there because those 25 people were working on maybe 12, 13 things at maximum. They were collaborating on those things at all times. As we did the stuff, we also captured results. This is the number of features that we deliver to our customers increased by more than 2-fold by implementing these things. You can see we've published these results in a study in InfoQ as well. I can link to that later. But that's what we did. We essentially looked at this lean circle and kind of implemented the parts of this lean circle as they stood in our context, and then kept improving it over time. This was in the 2008-2009 timeframe through till 2015, and we didn't have any of the frameworks available to us. This was just taking a lean approach and having the people who were in the system come up with the system and over time improve it. The recipe-driven framework stuff for Fordlandia, especially in respect to Fordlandia, a problem was using a recipe. That absolutely was a problem. But the bigger problem was sticking with it. You have to start somewhere. And for most of us, we start with someone comes in and gives us a recipe. And that's completely fair. Your organization is using a recipe. Makes sense. But the problem is sticking with it. The problem is banging your head against it, even though you know it's not working. How do you tweak it? How do you change it to make it fit your context a lot better? If parts of a framework or recipe do not work for you, you have to change it. And at the same time, if a framework or recipe falls apart when you change it, well, that thing by itself is not agile enough. Agile means adapting to change, and if your framework cannot adapt to change, well, I don't think that framework necessarily is agile enough. All of that, the stories, all the stuff to say that agile is about discovering what works best, whether it's at the team level or at scale. It's about discovering what works best, not knowing what works best. As the Agile Manifesto says, we are uncovering better ways. How do we uncover better ways to scale? I happen to be lucky enough to be part of one of these scaling efforts, actually multiple scaling efforts, but this one in particular, where we went and discovered our own way forward. So, just some references on all the stuff. I'll have to send you a link to a copy of the slides. Remind me on that, Leland, please. All the references are here, some of which actually you all posted as well. As I mentioned earlier, if this sort of stuff interests you, if flow interests you, if whiskey interests you, check out the Drunk Agile podcast, Drunk Agile channel. That's Dan Vicanti and I drinking whiskey and talking about all of this fun stuff. If scaling stuff interests you, scaling 4 in particular, there is a great book out there by the best author ever in all lifetimes ever. Sorry, that's just yeah. If this stuff interests you, Scaling Simplified is out there. Feel free to pick up a copy at Amazon or LeanPub. And if you need even more information, prokanban.org has a lot of free real learning resources around this stuff, around flow, around understanding how these things work. The certification and trainings are out there as well, but what I would highlight for you all are the free resources. There are a lot of free resources you can actually find there that will help you understand flow and implement flow. And that was that. Thank you so much for having me here. I think we have a decent amount of time for questions, etc.
We definitely do, Prateek. Yeah, thank you for all of this. And we'll open the floor up to questions here live or in the chat. I'll kick us off really quickly. I'm kind of curious in your research on Ford, if like the competitors, I think General Motors existed at the time. So did any of the competitors try and implement something similar to Fordlandia? And sorry, I mentioned General Motors, Max. I didn't mean to, but anyways, so yeah, just really curious about what the competitive landscape looked like at the time.
Yeah, they didn't. I did not find any reference to anyone else trying to create their own rubber plantation. I think this vertical integration thing was something that Ford was trying out. It did not quite work at that point for him. They did borrow a lot of ideas from Ford. Like the assembly line literally became a thing. And the fact that they started losing workers to Ford caused them to raise their wages as well. A lot of those things kind of worked out for the workers over time. But yeah, I did not see any mention of General Motors or anyone else trying to do the vertical integration.
All right. Well, thanks for that answer. And we'll pass it right over to the ex-GM worker, Max.
Still recovering from the scars from the Agile transformation that we attempted and had a ton of fun doing, but can't really say succeeded. But hey, Prateek, thank you. This was phenomenal. Now, may I say, there was one particular topic that I'm very passionate about that I didn't hear a lot about, and I'd like to see how delivering value, measuring value delivered, can just get incorporated in this a lot more. Because I get it. It's awesome to eliminate waste. It's awesome to be lean and all the various, but if you're not delivering value and not measuring it and verifying it, what good is all the work you're doing?
Yeah,
as lean as you might be, as lean as you might be.
Yeah, you're hitting on something that I've been on a rant about of late, actually.
Yeah.
I believe that most common frameworks have misguided product folks. They've ended up guiding product folks in the wrong direction. They've ended up guiding product folks, and trust me, I'll answer your question. I'm getting to it. They've ended up guiding product folks in the direction of backlog management, in the direction of prioritization and capacity planning, as opposed to guiding them towards feedback, as opposed to guiding them towards, you delivered something, what happened with that? Did that actually produce value? Because you cannot determine value ahead of time. Unless you have a signed contract from the government, you cannot determine value ahead of time. The only time you can determine value is when it's in the customer's hand. So you have to, as a product person, be focused on getting feedback from customers and make that a part of your value stream. Your value stream, if you cannot determine value till something has gotten to the customer, your value stream is not done till something has gotten feedback. If you've made that part of your value stream, now optimizing the flow there means you have whip limited that whole value stream. So if you haven't gotten fluid back, you can't pull the next thing in. So now lean is about idea to feedback, not just about producing stuff.
Yes, not just the delivery into a
Yeah.
production environment or whatever. It's like that
Mhm.
feedback. Thank you, thank you. And I would also say that very spot on about the product folks, but even developers and other people in the team can actually get on board with like, hey, I can measure how many times our end users click on stuff that we put out there. Like everybody can chip in and this does this deliver value? But there are more questions, so I'm gonna be quiet before Ben cuts me off.
Kamal, I'm gonna come to you real quick, but Max, I have to say one more thing. As a developer, when I was a developer, my most enthralling and my most frustrating moments were when I was watching customers use my work. It was enthralling because I could immediately, we had customers sitting in the team room using it, we could immediately push new stuff and they could test it out for us and tell us, yeah, no, move it this way, move it that way.
Awesome.
Most frustrating was I was behind a wall, not allowed to talk to the customer, and they were trying to use the thing I designed, I worked on, and I was like, just click over there. You don't need to do all that. Just click over it.
But it wasn't
awesome.
intuitive, Prateek. Your
Exactly.
software was not
But
intuitive.
all feedback is good feedback, and that's what we learned there.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the question, Max. And thanks for the answer, Prateek. We're going to take these in order. So I'm going to get to Allison's question in the chat first, and then Kamal will get to you next. So Allison's question, can you repeat the implementation roadmap piece again? You have a roadmap. I think it's worth a repeat.
That slide actually only says if you have a roadmap ... and has the roadmap on it, or has an implementation roadmap on it. It is meant for you to complete the sentence. But if I were to complete the sentence, that if your Agile implementation has a roadmap, it's probably not Agile enough.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, Kamal, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'd just love to add yes and to what Max and Prateek were saying about the value equation. I see a lot of discrepancy in the arena about initial conversations about what the definition of value is to begin with. And so many of these so-called leaders that come with this preconceived notion of what they think they're looking for never end up really spending the quality time with others in the team to try to define what value should mean to begin with. So more of an observation than a question. Thank you, Prateek and Max.
No problem. Yeah, I'm of the firm belief, and again, this is a lean concept. The only person who can determine value is your customer. The only person who can actually determine value is your customer, because they're the ones paying the bill. They're the ones who are paying you money. If no one's going to pay you money, that thing's not valuable.
And yeah, Aaron has some observations in the chat, I think, along these lines of operational excellence is a function of customer-centric feedback as it is the proof of the value impact that customers can predict from your product and your service. Bloated bureaucracies lose sight of customers' interests. So yeah, I think just kind of agreeing more along those lines with you.
Yeah, we obviously didn't touch on this here. We don't have, it sounds like we all can sit here and talk about this all day. So I didn't touch on this here, but in the return on investment equation, for the most part, you do not know return. Your customer will tell you return after you deliver it. After you deliver it is what they'll tell you how valuable something is. Only thing you can control is investment. How much do I invest before I can get feedback from customers? Before I can find out if this was valuable or not.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, Max also said what makes the whole value conversation even more interesting. A lot of times it is perceived value. So
I like to say that the items that we're working on are potentially valuable. They're not necessarily valuable, they're potentially valuable. The customer will tell us if they're valuable or not.
Exactly. All right, we have time for a few more questions, so please feel free to come off mute, type in the chat, fire away.
Hey, Prateek, I noticed you didn't go deep into the making the larger teams.
Ah.
And I know there was some comments about that. Although I will say that next month, whenever Natalia and I are presenting, one of the topics I talk about is that, and I actually used an article, one slide from something you wrote out there about the different team sizes as well. So didn't know if you wanted to hit anything about that a little more. So
Yeah, it's the one that always comes up because we're not used to it. It's one of those
right.
things that you know it's a rule that is out there that your teams should be small, and I encourage people to break rules to see if they help you flow value to customers. That is a rule that we broke in a couple of places, and it seemed like it improved the flow of value to customers. In those cases, it does seem like it's improved the flow of value to customers. So it obviously requires certain things like limiting WIP. It requires things like people working together, which small teams require too. Small teams also require those things. That social contract, the social building of the team. Small teams require that too. It requires those things. But if you limit WIP, what you can do is by having larger teams, you can limit the number of teams in the organization, which actually lowers the WIP of the entire organization. So when you lower the WIP of the entire organization, things don't get in each other's way as much.
Excellent. I see Aaron has his hand up. Go for it.
No, thank you so much. This was a fantastic talk. So one thing I've learned and sort of discovered is when you sort of play with team harmonics, you do get some unique, I would just say, explorations. So I think taking an existing legacy team and making it just big again probably doesn't generate very much. But I will say teams that go through an agile cycles together, but then you make them larger, I found there's some unique benefits there. The number one, they just don't need the same bureaucratic controls. So you really you're bringing another 10-15% of resources to the, to the flow. And I would say being able to be very flow driven in that environment, I've experienced very large benefits there. And then regenerating the harmonics again, right? So people from that environment go back down. And what I've really sort of figured out is that when people are new to the organization or are new to work professionally, because they just got out of college or whatever, getting in those small agile teams really makes a big difference for them. But then when things need to scale, you can, like they've sort of earned their way up to the larger flow teams and then can recycle down. That's an experience I've had on and off for a long time, actually.
I'm going to give credit to my good friend, and don't tell him I said he's really smart, Dan Vicanti. Do not tell him I said that. But Dan says that the next two big frontiers that Agile has to crack are org design, how do you design for flow, and finance. If Agile can crack these two, we'll be set for a whole bunch of time. Don't tell him I said he's smart.
All right, thanks for that answer, Prateek. We got time for one last question. So Dana, please go ahead.
Hi, Prateek, great presentation. I liked how you quickly went over the history of Ford and Toyota, how Lean got developed, which led to agility practices and frameworks, and it was a really nice overview. I like to teach the same thing as well, so it's good to confirm what I've been doing. I'm a Scrum Master, and I decided to take a lean manufacturing certification program at a community college here outside of Milwaukee. And you can, in that class, as the instructors and the students are talking, just strike out lean and put agile there in terms of a lot of the challenges and influencing behaviors and new ways of working. And that the main thing that I'm learning, and I guess this is just classroom and books, hearing my classmates talk about what's going on in their companies, in their manufacturing companies. But the big thing that's gonna make a lean transformation successful is culture, and that culture has to be driven from the number one top person in that plant, whether it's the president, the owner, the CEO. That's the main thing there. And I know there are org changed management is being used in various different practices and organizations with their agile transformation. They're just starting to do some of that in lean, and at least that's what I'm hearing. They're adding more of that. So I kind of wanted to get your take on when you had said you kind of hinted at why is agile transformation failing, and to me I think it's failing because we're not getting the top people really on board using lean thinking, using kata, and bringing that down. So I'll stop and let you respond because you keep shaking your head.
Because you're absolutely right. And I'm just talking about this from a correlation perspective. I don't know if it's called causation. From a correlation perspective, where I have been most successful in influencing change is where we've had a buy-in from the top. It really depends on the level of the leadership that brings me in or brings us in to work. That has, then again, this is just correlation. I don't know if it's causation. That is proportional to how effective a change in culture, change in behavior, change in processes is. I don't. I mean, you're saying all the things that I would say otherwise. Yeah.
Yes, excellent. And I think just the final observation, Toroko, you had a really good observations in the chat. Her final one, Peter Drucker saying culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah, I think that really sums up a lot of this today. So we're just a few minutes over time, so we'll go ahead and end it. Prateek, I really wanted to thank you for coming out. Throw on some virtual applause, folks, here for him. It was a great presentation. Really enjoyed it, learned something about history, which I always enjoy myself. So really appreciate it. And the recording will be up on YouTube by early next week. And Prateek, we can also get the slides from you, and we'll be in touch with you about that. But again, fantastic presentation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, folks, thanks for having me. It's great.
All right. Y'all take care, and we'll see you next month.
Yeah,
all right. See you. Okay. Bye-bye.